Big Tuesday night here. Playoff rankings just released. As I always say, the paper is still hot. It just came out of the printer, even though all this looks hand-drawn. So let's recap this for those of you who did not choose to tune in and you just want to get the information here first. Thank you so much. Georgia's number one. I don't think we need to waste much time with that. Ohio State did jump Alabama, which we expected. So they're number two, Bama's three. There sits the Cincinnati Bearcats at number four. We obviously are going to talk a lot of Cincinnati over the next 5 minutes. Michigan is five. Notre Dame sitting there at six. I got some thoughts on Notre Dame, as I have for about the past month. And then we've got the Big 12, essentially. We got Oklahoma State 7, Baylor 8. We got Ole Miss sitting there at 9. And then Oklahoma is number 10. I want to take you back to the preseason when we did a segment. Colin, we did several segments, by my recollection, about Cincinnati. And we took some heat. Can you believe that? Some people criticized us. It's always us when we get criticized. It's me when we get praised. It's the opposite of the way leadership is supposed to work, I'm told. I kid. But seriously, we did take a lot of heat because we said, for the first time ever, regardless of what our personal opinion is, I'll get to my personal opinion in a second, we believed on this program, if Cincinnati went undefeated, there was going to be a spot for him in the playoff. We did not believe in the conspiracy that the committee had always met behind closed doors and brushed past the cigar smoke in their faces to look at a grease board and say, how are we going to keep that G5 team out this year? It's not like that. They haven't deserved to be in. The G5 teams have not deserved a spot. We have believed that team was going to, by the own metrics and data listed by the committee, deserve to be in. Okay, I've stood by that opinion all year. That has not changed. As of this night, that has not changed. That has been my feel on how the committee will handle Cincinnati. Now, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to give you my personal opinion, and it's going to sound really murky. It's going to sound really hypocritical, but it's not. There's the committee over there, and I'm telling you what I think they'll do. And then there's me over here, committee of one, and what I would do. But that's not where I want to start. Have you looked at Notre Dame lately? I think you have, because I look at my inbox and a lot of you are talking about the Irish. There is what we are going to end up calling on this show the looming Notre Dame conundrum. And I try and work conundrum in at least once a week. I often fail, but here we go. The Notre Dame conundrum that looms is, for the first time ever, I think this program is going to cost itself a shot in the college football playoff because it is not in a conference. It's never happened before. It's always been rumored. It's been fabled. It's been something that you say, oh, one day, one of these days, Notre Dame not being in a conference is going to bite them. This is probably your day. This is probably your year. And I have maintained for a long time that I do not think anyone in South Bend, Indiana, cares about your opinion on whether Notre Dame should be in a conference or not. They don't care about mine, yours. They don't care about any conference commissioner's opinion. The only thing that was ever going to possibly entice the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame to join a conference is if it really bites them in terms of wallet and in terms of postseason inclusion. And it could do both this year. Now, Notre Dame's not going to hurt for money, but it will hurt them, make no mistake, if they're sitting there 11-1 and they are watching conference champs go to a playoff that they know good and well they would be in had they locked down an ACC championship. And I would feel very good, for the record, about Notre Dame winning the ACC if they resided in that conference this year. I mean, we're talking right now, as far as I can tell, about potential scenarios that include Cincinnati versus Notre Dame. This is once we get to the end of the year, there is no debate here. If Cincinnati's a 13-0 conference champ, they're in over Notre Dame. If there's one spot left for both of them, that's done. Notre Dame, an 11-1 Notre Dame no conference championship against a 12-1 Oklahoma State, there's no debate. They're in. I don't think Notre Dame gets in over a 10-2 non-conference champ Bama if they're competitive against Georgia. So all that would be rectified, at least enough of it would be rectified if they had a conference championship. They're not going to have one, and therefore you could very well see Notre Dame on the outside looking in for the first time ever because of that point and that point alone. Now, they could still have some chaos break their way, obviously, and still make it in. Those are some of the disaster scenarios that we've talked about, and we'll talk about more. So I've been having arguments back and forth with several folks today about what ended up being talked about at length on television, I would imagine, tonight, and that is this path where we see a 12-1 Big 12 champion, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati at 13-0 as a conference champ in the AAC, and they're fighting over one spot. This could happen. It actually could come down to this. Obviously, the way this would happen is something along the lines of Georgia wins out, they're in. Ohio State or Michigan win out, they're in. So you got 2 spots there. And then whatever happens to that number 3 spot and that number 4 spot, there are several different ways that could break, but there are scenarios where you have an either or. You have either Cincinnati makes it in, or you have Oklahoma State make it in. But the way that people are really looking at it is if Bama beats Georgia. If Bama beats Georgia, both of them are going to the playoff. And then if you got that Big Ten champ in there, 3 of your spots are already taken up. And that's where the either or comes into play. And it's either a 13-0 Cincinnati or a 12-1 Big 12 champ Oklahoma State. Look, I know I led this by telling you, as I have all year, I think they're going to put Cincinnati in this thing if they're undefeated. And I'm going to reiterate my personal opinion on what the committee will do is I think they're going to put them in. That's what I think they do. Now I'm going to tell you what the committee of one would do. This would take me about 2 milliseconds. I would stamp Oklahoma State in. There would not be a moment's hesitation in my mind because I would revert right back to the same thinking I've always had. You are not about to sit there as an Oklahoma State Cowboy team and beat, the number 10 team this week, theoretically, and then the number 8 team in Baylor maybe next week in the conference championship game and still not rise above a G5 conference champ and a G5 conference champ whose strength of schedule is in the 100s because their own conference let them down this year. So I was texting back and forth with our buddy Daniel, part of the College Football Nerds channel, because he's on the other side of this. He believes Cincinnati should be in. And so I was giving him my thoughts, and he was giving me his point of view. He said, well, let me hit you with a little counter there. He said, the parts of Oklahoma State's schedule that they could control, they scheduled week out of conference competition. The parts of Cincinnati's schedule that they could control, they went and dialed up Indiana, Power 5 team, really good last year. Notre Dame, and went on the road for both of them and beat them. I acknowledge that. That's baked into my opinion. That's the reason I've taken Cincinnati serious all year. So please don't think I'm discounting that. Even having said all that, I'm telling you, if I've got a Power 5 conference champ and not a weak Power 5 conference, this is not the Pac-12 or the ACC. The Big 12, you're looking, or you have looked momentarily, or just a few moments ago, at the top 10. The Big 12 has 3 of the top 10 right now. This is not a weak conference. And so if you're winning that conference, and at the very end, you're beating 2 top teams in order to achieve that, yeah, you're going to my playoff. I happen to think I'm wrong on how the committee's going to handle it. So we'll see. Probably also has a lot to do with how Cincinnati disposes of East Carolina and Houston if, in fact, they do win both of those games. There are still several disaster scenarios in play, or maybe they're not a disaster to you. Maybe you're rooting for these things to happen. You've still got the Big Ten bumper car potentially in play, and that would include Wisconsin having to pull an upset in the Big Ten title game. And it would simply look like this. Don't care who wins Saturday. We're going to go to Ann Arbor Saturday. We're going to watch Ohio State play Michigan. Whomstever comes out of that game as the winner. If they go to Indianapolis and they get beat by Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, by the way, in case you didn't notice, is ranked 13th right now, and they're playing their best football. Wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. That would leave the Big Ten on the outside looking in. Shockingly, I know, but it would leave them on the outside looking in. You also have a distinct possibility of the Big 12 bumper car scenario. Right now, Oklahoma State looks to be the best shot out of that conference, but I got a couple questions actually about the Big 12. Can Oklahoma make it? Like Oklahoma's sitting there at 10 right now. They're a one-loss team. They could still win the conference. They would be a one-loss conference champ. I wonder, can they make it in? I mean, there's some people out there who think yes and people who think no. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm just telling you, I'm looking at the resumes. If you're watching on YouTube, it's a pretty graphic, by the way, he made. He's showing them to you. And what about Baylor? Baylor's 9-2, but they're ranked 8th right now. And Baylor still has potentially a Big 12 championship game of their own to play against either Oklahoma or, against Oklahoma State, I guess it would be. Can they make it in? Or could the Big 12 be left out entirely? Could Oklahoma win Saturday and then get beat in the rematch a week later against Oklahoma State? All of these things could happen. But I'll tell you the one I want to know. This would cause some surefire 5-alarm puckering in my home state. If Georgia goes to the SEC championship game, you got an itch right there between my eyes. If Georgia goes to the SEC championship game and they win, this is a moot point. If Georgia goes to Atlanta and they lose a close game to Alabama. Where are they going to fall? They're not falling out, obviously. Where are they going to fall? This is very important. This is critically important. I'm not a believer they would fall all the way to 4. I'm a believer they would fall to number 3 at worst. And let me tell you what that would mean. What that would mean is you're no longer undefeated, and you did not just win a conference championship. Now, you're still in the playoff, but here's where the reset button happens. All of a sudden, instead of being SEC champion, 1 seed undefeated Georgia, you are division winner, 1-loss Georgia that is not the 1 seed, and you may have to play Ohio State in round 1. And at that point, Georgia, and Georgia fans more specifically, this is how quickly things can change. I did a segment on this a couple of weeks ago. This is why immense pressure is on Georgia. Things can change so radically and so quickly because if you lose to Bama, all of a sudden you're looking and you're saying, whoa, we got to play Ohio State. And if you're playing Ohio State, it's because they're in the playoff, which means they beat Michigan and they beat Wisconsin and are probably playing lights out football in the process. And you're going to look and you're going to say, we got to go play them now. If we lose that game, what are we? Well, we're 12-2 with no conference championship and no college football playoff win. Like, what are we? That's why the regular season stuff is meaningless. They know it in Georgia. I'm telling you, I've tried to make this point on the show. We've been in such cruise control mode with Georgia because they've been so good all year. This is where the pressure starts. This is where it really ramps up. So that's what I'm paying attention to. If they win, they're number 1. If they lose, I want to know where they are. The other thing is, I kind of talked about this already. I really wonder who can get in at this point and who can't. I think a lot of that's going to have to do with how teams play this Saturday. But that Cincy conundrum and the Notre Dame conundrum, those are going to be really fun to watch.